Who all out there is ready to get merciless with Minthara? Today we're going to do an EDH version of the Minthara Merciless Soul deck. I had done a Historic Brawl version of the deck a couple weeks back, and today I'm going to do the EDH version of the deck that plays a lot differently. So for those who don't know what Minthara does, she's going to be over here. She's a 2 white-black elf cleric, 2/2, that says ward X, where X is equal to your experience counters. And then at the end of your end step, if you've had a permanent go to the graveyard, you get an experience counter. And then all creatures you control get +1/+0 equal to the amount of experience counters you have. So let's go ahead and build around that. Experience counters can be proliferated. So here's the beginning of where I want to take this deck. And we'll go ahead and switch over to another screen so I can show you all the cards I've selected for the recommendations. As I was saying before the transition, we're going to start with anything that proliferates. We want to be able to get our experience counters as high as possible, as quickly as possible. But you can only get one per turn naturally through the Minthara trigger. With Proliferate, as soon as you have a counter, you can go ahead and start boosting the experience count faster and faster, which makes the small creatures more threatening and makes Minthara that much harder to get rid of with direct removal. So let's go ahead and start with the guy showing on the screen there. It's Yagmathran Physician. For 2 black, you get a 2/4 human cleric with protection from humans. You can pay a life and sacrifice another creature to put a -1/-1 counter on up to one other creature and draw a card. But this is the part we want the most. For black, discard a card, proliferate. This is the most expensive recommendation I have for today's video, but it's also one of the most powerful cards in the set of recommendations. It does a lot of things that we want to do. You can sacrifice creatures, which will trigger Minthara natural. You can put -1 counters on things, which then you can proliferate later to help slow roll your opponent's threats into the ground. And you can proliferate with him without actually having another card to do it. It's just a great package, and it's very worthy of the father of machines. Next up, we have Carnage Bastion. This fits in any kind of deck since it's a colorless land, but the important part here is pay for it, tap it, proliferate. It's just straight up tap it, do what we want, and then you can add a counter to everything. So if you have negative counters on your opponent's creatures, make them smaller. If you have +1/+1 counters on your stuff, make them bigger. And then most importantly, experience counter goes up. Another similar version to this is Contagion Clasp. For 4 colorless, you get an ETB effect that says put a negative counter on a creature, and then you can also pay for and tap to proliferate just like Carnage Bastion. So you kind of get a backup version of Carnage Bastion, but you also get to put a negative counter on a creature to start killing them. And then the big daddy of all this, the Contagion Engine. For 6 colorless, you get an ETB that puts a negative counter on each creature a target player controls. Then you can pay for, just like the Bastion, just like the Clasp, tap to proliferate, but then it proliferates again. This is the best proliferation card in the options here, since you get to get 2 of them off of them, and you get to nuke all of somebody's creatures. Like, especially if somebody's playing like a token deck, you can just wipe them out and slow roll their creatures to death. Next is Core Prowler. It's a colorless 4 cost Phyrexian Horror 2/2 that has Infect, which means when it deals damage to a creature, it puts negative counters equal to the damage dealt, or if it hits a player, it puts poison counters equal to the power of the creature on the player. So if you manage to hit them with this thing, you can proliferate the Infect counters, or the poison counters. But the big thing here is when it dies, you get to proliferate. So if you want to use it to block and shrink one of their creatures to put negative counters on, or swing into them in the same way, because they're probably not going to want to let you put the poison counters on them, especially if they know you have heavy proliferate in your deck. It just gets, and this thing gets more and more dangerous as the game goes along as well. Because with Minthara's experience counts, it's going to make the power on this thing bigger. And if you get up to 8 experience and say you have Rogue's Passage in the deck, which is what I would recommend putting in here, you're going to nuke somebody with Infect damage. Very similar to the Core Prowler, we also have Martyr for the cost. Doesn't have Infect, but it's a 1 and a white human soldier 2/2, and when it dies, you get to proliferate again. It's something that you want to have die, which will then, if you do it on your turn, make Minthara go up, and then you start to proliferate the counters. For even more proliferation, we also have Grateful Apparition. For 1 and a white, you get a 1/1 flying spirit that when it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. For whatever reason, they took Thrumming Bird from the old New Phyrexia block and reintroduced it as a white spirit. But hey, in our deck, we love it. So every time we poke somebody with it, you get to proliferate, and as the experience counters goes up, this thing gets bigger too. As with the Grateful Apparition, if we don't have Apparition at hand, we can also kind of do a build your own version with Sword of Truth and Justice. For 3 colorless, we get an equipment that says equip 2. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from white and blue. When the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, put a counter on target creature you control, then proliferate. It's a little more expensive for the deck. It's about a $25 card, but this thing is amazing for what we're trying to do. You pump up a creature, get it protection, and then build up your own amped up version of a Grateful Apparition. For a quick and easy proliferation trigger, Grim Affliction. For 2 and a black, we get an instant that puts a negative counter on a target creature, and then you proliferate. It essentially gives -2/-2 to whatever you target with it, and then you get to proliferate everything else that's going on the board. It accomplishes a lot for 3 mana and keeps the counter train rolling along. One of the newer proliferate cards in the format, our last recommendation for proliferate is Unbounded Potential. For 1 and a white, you get an instant that has 2 options. Choose one, put a counter on each of up to 2 target creatures, or proliferate. The proliferate part's the important part here, but it also has Entwine for 3 and a white, which means you pay this in addition to the casting cost, and you get to do both. It's a little expensive for the Entwine version for what it does, but the part we care about here is the proliferate part mostly. It gets better if you can afford to Entwine it later, but by then your creature's going to be super powered by Minthara, and it's not really going to matter. Another way we can boost our experience count without going into the proliferation tricks is Daxos the Return. For 1 white black, you get a zombie soldier 2/2 that whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get an experience counter, and you can pay 1 white black, put a white and black spirit enchantment creature onto the battlefield with power and toughness equal to the number of experience counters that you have. So using him in the deck requires us to use a little more enchantment heavy stuff to get the trigger going, but rather than using him to get the experience count up, we can just use him as a way to take advantage of us stacking up the counters with the proliferate and using his ability to start popping out the big tokens, which the nice part about with Minthara is they're going to have power and toughness equal to the experience count, but then they're going to get an additional power boost, essentially doubling their power because of Minthara giving them the bonus. Aside from trying to boost our creatures up really big with the experience counters, what else can we do here to take advantage here? In the Historic Brawl video that I did, I had mentioned having the boost take advantage of Ghoul Color Gisa and Nested Shambler by making them better at making their tokens, because they're a virtual multiplier in that format, and you can have both of those cards in this version of the deck. And if you don't understand what I mean, it's simple. If you have 5 experience counters, your creatures get +5/+0. If you sacrifice a 2/2 token that's laying around, it's already increased to a 7/2 by the experience counters off of Minthara. Ghoul Color Gisa's activated ability then allows you to sacrifice a creature, and you get 2/2 zombies equal to the power of the sacrificed creature. So if you sacrifice a 7/2 boosted token, you get 7 more of those 2/2 zombies, which are all 7/2s, giving you 49 power off of that 1/7 power creature. It just explodes the damage potential of the deck. And with Nested Shambler, it's the same thing. You get squirrel tokens when it dies equal to its power. Well, if you have a bunch of power boosted off of this with the experience count, and when it dies, you're going to get a bunch of squirrel tokens, which are also boosted by the experience count. It's just stupid. So what else can we do to take advantage of the increased power? Let's take a look at Disciple of Bolas. For 3 and a black, you get a 2/1 human wizard that when it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice another creature. You gain X life, you draw X cards equal to the power of the sacrificed creature. If the stuff is going to be big and it takes time to build up, you can just use the Disciple to recover some of the life you've lost along the way, as well as refill your hand, because you're likely burning up a lot of your hand trying to get those experience counters up. Another way to take advantage of all this power boosting we got going on is Altar of Dimension. For 2 colorless, we get an artifact that says sacrifice a creature. Target player mills cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. This is a favorite of mine. Mill strategies are hard to do in EDH, but when you're able to drain someone drain someone's deck out in response to a combo or some other shenanigans, it's great. And as the experience counters start to stack up, this just gets better and better. And eventually, you could make your base 1/1s able to mill out your opponents for 5+ cards per sacrifice, which combos with the Altar of Dementia very, very well. Another card to consider is Rite of Consumption. For 1 and a black, you get a sorcery that says, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature. Rite of Consumption deals damage to target player equal to the power of the sacrificed creature. It's a black fling. There's not much more to be said about this. If you got something big enough that you want to fling at somebody, chuck it at them to finish them off, bolster your life total, or assist somebody else in trying to kill somebody in the same time. It's just more experience equals more damage, and it's good. A more recent addition to the format is Ruthless Technomancer. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice another creature. If you do, create a number of treasure tokens equal to the power of the sacrificed creature. It also has 2 and a black, sacrifice X artifacts, return target creature with power X or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. X cannot be 0. This thing's great because as long as you got the experience counts up, you sacrifice some, rando token, get a bunch of treasures, and then you can start getting things back with the Ruthless Technomancer. Also, sacrificing those treasures does trigger Minthara to get more counters. Because things are going to die, you want to sacrifice things anyways, so this is a good way to get some things back along the way. The last card, and one of the cheapest that I have ever found, it's like a quarter right now, it's a rare, Dragon Throne of Tarkir. For 4 colorless, we get a legendary artifact equipment that says the equipped creature has Defender and 2 and tap. Other creatures you control gain Trample and get +X/+X, where X is equal to the equipped creature's power. I honestly forgot about this card until I was digging around for this. This is actually really good here because you can put it on a creature you don't want to lose in combat, most likely Minthara, and then you activate it to essentially double the power of your creatures, since the equipped creature is also going to get the power boost. But then you can also break board stalls because of the trample, because we're boosting these things power, but none of them trample, and they're going to have low end bodies anyway, so they're probably going to die in combat. Well, if you make a bunch of 8/2, 7/2, whatever, and you give them trample all of a sudden and +7 or whatever the experience count happens to be, you're going to run somebody over Craterhoof style. So what did you guys think? Did you like my take on Minthara Merciless Soul? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what I'm doing here, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you are interested in the Historic Brawl version of the deck, the link is going to be up here at the end of the video. And as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.